What's up, guys? Today I want to talk about the next gen consoles and their relation to future NASCAR games. I'm not going to talk about NASCAR Heat 4 or whatever they're going to call it. That's most likely due out to be later this year, and or even the game after that, right? Because so far from all the leaked information, we know that the the PlayStation 5 is more likely than not going to be released sometime Christmas holiday 2020, more or less the time that I've always predicted or talked about earlier. Um, it might be a little after, whatever the case is. We're looking at about late 2020, early 2021. It's really not that far away. So we know that they're working on the next NASCAR game, which we're assuming is NASCAR Heat 4. And I'm thinking there's going to be one more after that. At some point, obviously, 704 is going to have to focus on the next generation of their games. And right now, the word is that most big developers already have developer kits from Sony for the next gen console. So there's a lot of developers that are already working on a next gen title. Um, I'm not. I have no idea if 704 is one of these people who has a developer kit. I would think that anyone who's a developer probably all they have to do is contact Sony and they'll get a developer kit. I don't think Sony's gonna be picky. They want people working on next gen stuff. So I have to assume that 704 must have a developer kit for the next gen. Are they actually working on stuff for the next gen? I doubt it. But if any reputable developer has to be at least in the planning stages for the next gen. You got to be ready for this stuff. You can't just wait till the last minute and then start working on a game for on the next gen. So I'm hoping they have developer kits, and I really hope that they are at least well into planning stages for what they want to do with the next gen. Which is, like I said, that's at least a couple of games away. I'm not going to talk about the things I've already talked about as far as features and the issues that are in the game, in these games that they need to work on for the next game. I've already talked about that. What I want to focus on with this video is mostly about next gen, the consoles, and the development of the games that are going to come out for that. In particular, NASCAR and 704. So here are the things that I'm focused on myself, that I'm looking towards and hoping that 704 has this in mind. Also Sony, the first thing I want to say is, in terms of features, things I have talked about, but I know I'm pretty sure we're not going to see that. Not in the next game or the game after that. I think it's off the radar for that. But things I've talked about. Things like face scanning, like you see in NBA 2K. I would love to see that in the next game. But in all honesty, I know I'm not going to see that. And it's God knows if they've ever even thought about it, right? But I have talked about that before. I've brought it up. But in relation to the next gen, I do think that it's not really out of place to expect these guys to be thinking of stuff like that, because this isn't actually that innovative. It's been out for a while now. It works quite well. And it would be cool, especially in games where you have a custom character. Who doesn't want to see themselves in the game? That's what's great about face scanning, and one of the things that I love most about the NBA 2K franchise, even with all of its flaws, the fact that you can literally play the game as yourself. That's an amazing thing. And I do think that by the time the next generation rolls around, most games where you create your own character should have face scanning. Face scanning should not be such a big deal by the time next gen consoles come out. So I hope that 704 is at least in the planning stages of stuff like that. I would love to see that for the next gen. I think that would be great. Um, Obviously, graphics. I haven't complained about graphics. Those of you who have watched my videos, I haven't been that critical. Um, yeah, the graphics are not on par with other race titles, especially games like Forza or Project Cars or Gran Turismo. All of these games, or even Formula One, all of these games have better graphics. It's not even close, right? But I haven't been that critical, and for me, I've always been of the mindset that the graphics, they're not game breaking. It's not a game breaking issue for me at the moment. But now we're talking about next gen. And most people that are going to buy this next gen are expecting much better graphics, and rightfully so. You cannot come out the box with another game that just isn't on par with other race titles. And by the way, when it comes to development and graphics, racing games tend to be some of the best looking games. It's not as hard to have better graphics in games that are. This is a more closed environment. It's not an open world game where you have these immense maps that are constantly generating images as you move along. These are very small, enclosed environments. Basically, you're rendering racetracks and cars, right? And hopefully cutscenes for presentation and all of the stuff that comes with it. But that is not difficult in games like racing games because these are very focused and linear experiences. So it's easier to focus on polishing up everything because it's not procedurally rendering things as you move along. So I am expecting a huge, massive upgrade in graphics. We should be blown away by the time next gen rolls out. So I am expecting a huge graphical leap. I cannot be as forgiving as I've been with these current NASCAR games. I have been very kind to 704 in terms of graphics. The only complaints that I have made are with things like aliasing issues, and even pop-in textures, the shadowing, all this stuff. There is a lot that even to this day is still issues that are visually in the game. But for next gen, yeah, you got to come out and wow people. People should, when they see that game, they should be like, I need to play that. That looks amazing. Also, in regards to next gen, Sony has talked a lot about upgrades in sound and 3D sound and how sounds play a huge role in games, and they want to focus on that. They want developers to focus on that because sound, for the most part, has been an oversight with this generation of consoles. Developers have been focused a lot more on other things, right? And I'm talking about in game development in general, not just NASCAR or anything like that. But they are talking about, focusing a lot more on sound and this thing they call 3D sound, where it's going to play a huge role in most games. And I couldn't agree more. Sound has been an oversight, and it needs to be addressed. And NASCAR games in particular, historically, have never really sounded that good. So it's not just 704. it's been an oversight for all developers, even going back to EA. And those of course, most people watching this right now are NASCAR fans. You understand how important sound is in the world of NASCAR. We're talking about cars pushing 700, 750 horsepower. There's nothing in the world that sounds like NASCAR uh, or these cars just running at full song. It's a beautiful thing, but it's very immersive. And how developers have not focused more on that is, to me, it's a big mystery. But there's no reason that in today's day and age that we haven't had a NASCAR game that sounds authentic. There's no excuse other than they just haven't focused on it. So I fully expect, when the next gen rolls around, that should be a top priority along with graphics. So we got those things. Now here's another thing that I really want to talk about that I haven't talked a lot about, and that's accessories and the relation to these next gen consoles. One of the biggest problems I had with uh, I can't call them next gen anymore. The current gen, PS4, Xbox One, what have you. One of the biggest issues I had when those consoles were released was that older accessories were no longer compatible. Things like a wheel and pedal setup, right? So those of us who play these racing games with actually using a wheel and pedal set, we had to purchase new PS4 compatible and I guess Xbox One compatible wheel and pedal sets. There was no reason to do that. There's no way, no reason that they couldn't have made older generation wheel and pedals compatible with modern day games. They did that strictly as a cash grab or as an appeasement to these manufacturers that make these wheel and pedal sets. You got Logitech, you got all these other manufacturers, Thrustmaster, whatever. Um, I think it would be a huge mistake if Sony and Microsoft did not make sure that the current accessories that are out are compatible with the next gen. And there's no reason that you can't do it. That any idea that, well, there's no way to do it because of the architecture of these consoles won't allow it, bullshit. And especially with the PS5 is gonna be backwards compatible. So there's no reason they can't do it. And I'm gonna be fucking livid if they come out and you can't use a PS4 wheel and pedal set, and then you got to go out and buy a whole new generation of wheel and pedals because they felt like it. So they need to make sure that they tell developers like 704 or Slightly Mad Studios, who makes Project Cars, or the people that work on Forza and all these other games. They need to understand, you got to make sure that these games are compatible with all these other wheel and pedal sets that are already out there. Because to expect people to have to go out and buy a new wheel and pedal set, that was one of my biggest complaints with this current generation of consoles. It really pissed me off. And it's going to piss me off even more because I have a motion simulator with a wheel and pedal setup that has sensors in it that the manufacturer of the motion simulator built into to work with that wheel and pedal set. If I can't use that wheel and pedal set, then I can't use this motion simulator with future NASCAR games. Unless I just buy the PC version, which I would rather do that than just go out and it's just a mess. I don't want to get into it, but they can't make that mistake again. And I hope that they're friendly towards consumers who already have all these accessories. One thing we already know in talking about accessories is that the current PlayStation VR is going to be compatible with the PS5. So that's also proof that you can still have that compatibility. You don't have to have something that, oh, it doesn't work anymore. You're gonna have to buy a whole new generation of accessories because we felt like it. So they did it for the PlayStation VR. There's no reason they can't do it for the wheel and pedal sets. Speaking of VR, that's another thing I want to see by the time the next generation of NASCAR games comes out. VR compatibility is a must. VR is tailor-made for race games. In fact, already most modern race games already have compatibility with VR headsets. So you got Project Cars and a lot of other games, Assetto Corsa, a lot of these games already, and Gran Turismo. So they already have compatibility with VR. I would love to play a NASCAR game with VR compatibility. That would be awesome. That would be immersive. So I know that's another thing that I know for a fact is not going to come out for the next game or even the one after that. I do think there's going to be, let's say NASCAR Heat 4 and NASCAR Heat 5. We're not going to see a next-gen NASCAR game for at least 3 years. Okay? I'm pretty convinced of that. Unless they're already deep in planning stages for the next-gen game, which I doubt. Nothing about 704 has struck me as a forward-thinking company. All right? I'm not bashing them. I'm just being honest. I don't see a lot of innovation. I don't see a lot of future planning. We're still begging year after year for the most basic features, things that are already considered outdated, things from games from 15 years ago. We want to see stuff that, for inexplicably, hasn't been a part of games in many years, and we're still fighting with 704 to give us these things. So it would be ridiculous to expect that they're so forward thinking and already planning on next gen. So I'm throwing this stuff out there on the off chance that 704 sees this video at any point. These are things you need to be on top of. And you got to have a NASCAR game that's VR compatible. I'd be the first to buy a VR headset if I could play a NASCAR game in VR. And imagine you really do give us authentic NASCAR sound. That plus VR, that would be amazing. Just that visceral experience would elevate the experience that much more. So, these are the things I'm expecting. I talked about the upgrading graphics and sound and making sure these accessories are not only compatible and available, but we get features like VR compatibility where you can play this game in virtual reality. That pretty much covers what I was thinking about in terms of next gen and NASCAR games. And I'm going to leave this video off by saying to 704, you have this, this license for till 2029. So it's another decade you're going to have this license. You really got to step up your game. When you finally develop a game for the next gen, you cannot repeat the mistake you made with the first game on this generation, which was NASCAR Heat Evolution. You cannot release another NASCAR Heat Evolution type of game, which is incredibly lacking in everything, bare bones, basically just a bunch of tracks and not much else going on. You can't do that again. You've asked us to stick around and support these games, and then accept these incremental changes every year, improvements. Yeah, you are improving these games, but you're not improving them fast enough. And it's one of the only genres of video games where consumers are expected year after year to accept small improvements and then expected to continue supporting these games, and you're buying these games, and you never feel like you got a fully fleshed out proper game that represents the sport of NASCAR. The things I always talk about, the lack of stats, the absolutely no presentation. There's no sense of accomplishment because all that happens in these games is you're jumping from one race to the next, and nothing really happens in between. It's bare bones, man. You cannot repeat that because every time you do that, you lose a huge group of people because they get fed up with supporting this stuff, and then they go away. They're just like, fuck this. I'm going to just go play other stuff. I'm done. And how many times can you afford to do that and survive? This consumer base is not like fucking Call of Duty or one of these other franchises that has so many people buying these games that you can afford to piss off a bunch of them. You're still going to make big money in sales. You cannot afford that with these games. So you have to focus on giving us what we want. And you should be grateful that you have a base of consumers who are just asking for basic features, outdated features. People want a fucking track map. Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but shit, how hard is that to do? Why are we 3 games in and no track map, no paint booth, just basic shit that people are always, why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? Simple, basic, outdated features from 15 fucking years ago, and we're still begging for this shit, and we're 3 games deep into this series, and you're still not delivering. And most developers would kill for a base, a consumer base like us, that are just, we're not asking for innovative shit. We're still fighting and arguing over shit that we used to get 15 years ago. Every year. You gotta step up your game. And in terms of the next gen, those are the things I expect you guys to really focus on. And for the love of God, you cannot release a NASCAR Heat Evolution level type of product for the next gen. Whatever you release for next gen, that first game has to be a fully fleshed out product where people are not asking still for these fucking basic features. You can't afford to do that. And I promise you, you're going to lose a lot of people. You've already lost people. Year after year, you hear a lot of people saying, I didn't buy this year's game. I'm done. These fucking people, they don't listen. They're not giving us simple stuff. They're not taking care of certain things. And why should they stick around? So, this is going to be the 4th game coming up this year. I already told you guys what I'm expecting. I do have certain expectations. And I'm not grading these guys on a curve anymore. So, I've been pretty nice about it in terms of as a consumer. But enough is enough. This next game has to feel like a fully fleshed out product. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now till we get some news. So what do you guys think about the next gen? About my thoughts on what I would expect and what they should be working on? I look forward to your comments later.